Hello, Brian.
Hi.
It's so nice to see you.
So nice to be seen. How are
And
you, Jen?
hey, everybody. So we're here for Mary, who's taking a break, and we will try to just, hold the fort down in her absence.
Fort
Uh,
held down.
Fort held down. Brian, nothing happening in the news, is there?
Never. That's the nice thing about the news is there's never anything new and we don't have to worry about it. Let's talk about rock and roll.
Okay. Okay, that sounds good. Or how about do you want to talk about some recipes like what you're cooking this summer? Or?
Oh, well, it's all Lebanese this summer.
Okay, actually, fuck that. Let's actually talk about what's going on.
That'll work.
The shocking news. I know, people. I hope you're all seated, but it turns out that a lawyer who worked for Donald Trump, our former president, turns out he's a sleazebag.
I'm shocked. Shocked. Shocked, mind you.
Yeah, I mean, and of all people, I mean, Rudy Giuliani of
No.
the yeah, that Rudy Giuliani of the shoe polish dripping down his sideburns and the Four Seasons total
That's the one you can't
landscaping
forget.
fame. I mean,
Sorry, I just can never forget doing a press conference. I'm sure he thought it was the Four Seasons, hotel change, but it
but as
was.
an aside, Brian, did you see the documentary? There was a short documentary
Yeah.
about the story behind the family that the woman, the matriarch who owns that place. Did you watch that?
Yes, yes, I
Uh,
did.
Really fantastic because the backstory is super interesting and what a sweet family that was and how they realized how to turn lemons into lemonade. But yes, Giuliani can turn lemonade into lemons, into rotten lemons. Actually, I am stunned. So tell me, Brian, what I don't know if you read the 70 plus page complaint filed in New York State Court. There's a lot that jumps out at me, but I'm curious for you what you find to be the most important in terms of the future of our democracy. Not so much the disgusting details, but they're related.
Well, I don't find anything shocking about these charges. This is all stuff that we've kind of known about Rudy. Putting it down in those 70 pages makes pretty plain the egregious assault he's had on our country. So it, I find actually some hope out of it because there are 70 pages of documentation that show exactly how screwed up he has, and to go through them individually would take more time than we have on air today. But I will say that the thing that I find uh, what slaps me in the face most is just for a guy who was known as America's mayor, for a guy who went after the mob. It seems like he learned from them and has adapted their style of governance and countenance with the public at large. In other words, I think he has adopted a mob mentality. Those charges and those 70 pages show that he has no concern for anyone other than himself and has no concern for the rule of law. And that's the thing that slaps you in the face more than anything else. A guy who prosecuted others for breaking the law has no care for the law.
Yeah, I just want to be clear. I know and I know these are allegations, and
Yes.
even though some of the allegations come with the claim, only some, that there are corroborating witnesses or audio or what have you, it's just a complaint, and
Yeah,
not
it is a complaint, and but it has a complaint based in fact. Of course, these are all alleged. He's an alleged criminal until he's convicted. He's just as Donald Trump still isn't a convicted rapist or
yeah.
that was all in civil court. So yes, but nonetheless, those allegations to be made against someone who dedicated their life to upholding the law is what is shocking. And
Yeah, and I think I just want to talk. I like that we're going to start with some of the human angle, but the intersection between, I would say, an Achilles heel or a major one, the intersection between human frailty and the ability to manipulate or blackmail or push people beyond their limits is something I think that the former president is keenly aware of. But in terms of Giuliani's own legacy, my God, reputation is a terrible thing to waste. And it's just I'm saddened though, because I mean, not that I ever thought he was a super great person, but I'm saddened to watch what alcohol and alcoholism can do to a person, because it's not funny to me to read the
No,
allegations that he's drunk morning, noon, and night.
I know
It
people that know him well who say he's drunk morning, noon, and night. I know people who took photos of him when they went out to dinner, and they haven't published them or haven't publicized them because they don't want to take advantage of the man. They actually feel sorry for him. And to the extent I feel sympathy, but well, let me put it this way: I feel empathy as a human being for another human being going through that. I feel no sympathy for what he's done
Of
because
course.
he's made those choices
I'm
himself.
but I'm speaking to, how I'm speaking specifically though to people who listen to the show or watch the show, who are either recovering alcoholics or trying to deal with addiction, or have family members in the same boat. And I
Yeah,
want to be
I
just very
do.
clear that I'm making a distinction between the disease of alcoholism and the behavior that he is separately, or it's entwined with that he's demonstrating, and those who will exploit that weakness. And it's
Yeah.
just, but let's get to the part when you reference, this is someone who is prosecutor, who was supposed to be upholding the rule of law, and then he seems to be the
Flouting the
opposite.
law.
Yeah, and so to me, what jumps out, what's to me the most troublesome part of this, is the allegations that he was telling this woman who worked for him, Dunphy, Noelle Dunphy, that he was
Mhm.
telling her that he was selling pardons for $2 million and splitting the proceeds 50-50 with Donald Trump. And so far, I have not heard Donald Trump say anything about this. And what's shocking to me is this: if Rudy were lying about this, he was just either one, trying to show off to Noel, or it was some sort of fever dream, or if instead he was exploiting other people in a kind of fraud scheme, and trying to solicit their money, even though he had no guarantee of doing it. There's still crime there, okay, or alleged crime. But if it were really happening, wouldn't Donald Trump, the first thing he'd be saying is, Rudy, why were you screwing me over? I never heard about this.
No, no.
My piece of this, because he
Where's
gets
my cut?
mad.
Where's,
Where's my
where's,
cut?
where's my cut? Yeah. Well, first of all, you can't believe anything Donald Trump says. And then Rudy is, I remember interviewing him, after 9/11, and he was, riding so high after that. And he always reminded me of it's a bit of the H.L. Mencken or Hunter Thompson thing. The only way to look at a politician is down. That's from Mencken and
What is
Thompson.
that? What does that
The
mean?
only way to look at a politician is down, and
What do you
that's
mean? Like looking down on them?
you look down on them because
Oh,
there's just really no other way to understand Rudy and what he does, other than the fact that he's always manipulating and conniving. And even back then, you look at it back then, you saw him after 9/11, and now if you put it in context to what he's doing today, it's like, oh, I get it. It was all about him even then. The idea
mm,
that with politicians, there's always a bit of narcissism, there's always a bit of something wrong in the actions that they take, even if they're for people. So it throws into question everything he's ever done. And you can't look at him now and you just part of me, because I do have relatives that are alcoholics. My father was one. My sister is one. You look and you feel bad for what they're going through, but nonetheless, my sister's trying to get help. My dad tried to get help. Rudy doesn't seem to be wanting help, and instead he's hurting, and that's a problem that I don't know how you deal with. The criminal
well,
behavior is
yeah.
just without. I mean, it's loathsome.
It's hard. It's so
The alleged
interesting.
criminal behavior.
Right. And when you look at his, I mean, the complaint is replete with claims of grandiosity. Like there's this, she was supposed to get paid $1 million a year, and the complaint says that's what people around him were being paid. Or he claims that he could, the idea that he was going to, it's so speculative, he could earn $10 million a year doing, I'm not sure, where he was earning money, what he was doing, but there is something very credible in there that he was apparently getting paid for some kind of consulting, and he was having whoever his client was paying a third party so he could keep that income away from his then current wife with whom he was going through a divorce.
Shock,
Um,
shock, mind you.
well, I'm shocked, but this stuff isn't just, as someone who studies white collar crime and knows the, Title 18 well enough to know, I can tick off assortments of, of federal felonies that this involves. And some of it is tax evasion allegation, some of it is, wire fraud, some of it's obstruction of justice. If you lie in, court papers, it could be even perjury in some cases. There's a lot going on here. And I
Why do
guess
we always mention the same charges whenever it's anyone around Donald Trump or including Donald Trump? Sedition, obstruction of justice, perjury. It's like
wire
they have a
fraud, mail fraud.
business manual.
Well,
At some point in time, I want to look at their pamphlet because it's
yeah,
it's
right.
whacked.
I wonder though, Brian, the one person that we're not mentioning is the Attorney General. Why is it always that it's some woman, whether here it's Noelle Dunphy or it was, why am I forgetting her name, who worked for Mark Meadows, who testified for the January 6th,
Yeah, yeah.
Cassidy Hutchinson.
Cassidy
Why
Hudson.
is it
Yeah.
always people, if you just, is it disrespect for young women? Because anyone in the world knows that an assistant, a young man or a young woman who is working very close to somebody in power, and if that person is perceived as being corrupt, they're going to be the one who's going to know the most. So why the fuck is it, excuse my French, that it's
Oh,
Merrick
sounded
Garland?
like good English to me. Go ahead.
Why is it that he's always the last to know this stuff? I mean, for
Well,
I just I don't know what's going on at the Justice Department, but it seems like this probably came as a surprise to them. No,
I don't know that it did. I do know
okay,
that there are people that in the DOJ that I know that are aware of some of this, and I know Merrick Garland. I'm not defending him. I'm just going to tell you what those, and I don't know him well, but I do know people, former prosecutors who do, and their concern about Merrick is that he's too meticulous. It's not that he's going to miss anything; it's that he's going to miss nothing, and it's almost to the point that he's dotting every I, crossing every T, and is going to make sure. And that's a good thing, as you well
yes,
know,
of
in a
course, right.
prosecutor to do that. And he's not going to come out and say anything beforehand. The question with Merrick Garland is, what does he know?
Right.
And do we expect any movement out of him at any point in time?
You know,
And with
yeah.
the latest statement by by the former special prosecutor that they jumped the gun on Operation Crossfire Hurricane and all that kind of stuff, that perhaps he will take no action, that Merrick will never take action against Trump. And I don't buy that. I just buy
Okay,
that.
so let's transition then to
Okay.
you mentioned Crossfire Hurricane. You're talking about the Durham report,
Durham.
right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Do you want to tell us, because it's so funny. I follow almost everything, but whenever Durham report comes on, it's kind of like someone's telling me like professional sports is on, and like I just turn off my brain because I think it's just not, there's not enough room in there for that. Yeah. So tell me more about, because I thought Durham, I thought we already knew that he found nothing incriminating. So why is Donald Trump over on Truth Social spitting this like it's a condemnation of the FBI?
Because what happened that he came out and said that there was, that they jumped the gun, and that they started
Wait,
an
can you stop? Can
investigation.
you can you back up all the way to who appointed? Because this guy was
No,
appointed even though
well,
he shouldn't have been. Okay,
Obama
give us a
appointed.
nutshell. Okay,
Yeah, all right. So in a nutshell, President Obama appointed or opened an investigation in 2016 into the Trump campaign. And the special counsel Durham said that it was extremely troublesome, that there were failures, that there was bias that kept agents from carefully examining evidence, and that it was a long-awaited report that came out yesterday. It criticized the FBI for jumping the gun on the campaign
And you're
based
going
on,
back,
quote,
sorry, let me just back
yeah,
up. So you're talking about after the Steele dossier started circulating,
right,
Obama opens this, and that was called Crossfire Hurricane. So,
right.
and then, but Durham wasn't he reappointed by Merrick Garland though too to be a special counsel or
Yes,
something? Okay.
exactly. He was tapped in 2019 by Donald Trump's Attorney General Bill
Oh,
Barr,
right.
to re-examine how the government hunted down the leak. So he issued basically the sentence that stands out for everyone is raw, unanalyzed, and uncorroborated intelligence. And the problem with it, all right, you can condemn the FBI. Go ahead, condemn the FBI. God knows I have on a couple of occasions, and I've worked closely with them. But the problem is, how do you determine I mean, the FBI and the Department of Justice went through the hoops, investigated everything. Nothing happened from this investigation. How do you know that there's nothing there unless you investigate it? That is the biggest conundrum that you can't get past. And Donald Trump saying it was all a put up job. Well, you never got charged with anything. Nothing ever happened. The Steele dossier, we did find out that it was garbage. It was reported on as, I always found it specious because unfortunately I've had the experience of working with the Department of Justice and some of those people for many years and found it to be, specious from the very beginning. So did the FBI. So coming out and saying, that the investigation was unnecessary, well, actually, that doesn't prove anything. It proves that the investigation was necessary in order to dispel rumors. So nothing happened. The FBI did its job. And Durham coming out is it's propaganda for Donald Trump to use going forward in his latest attempt to regain the White House. That's all this
But
is.
let's be clear, and I'm going to jump to if you want to pick this one up, Norm. With the Durham report, even though he comes out and says, "Well, it turns out it didn't pan out and it wasn't necessary," um, Benghazi, how many iterations of Benghazi probably weren't necessary either. But with this, Norm, in the actual report, if it was so bad, does he recommend criminal charges? I mean, what's the bottom line with Durham? Just that, oh, it wasn't necessary, or is it a slap on the wrist, or is it more?
The bottom line is sophistry. Remember that he
Yes.
did bring three charges, got one basic slap on the wrist for Peter Strzok.
Right.
The others went nowhere. Remember that in this report, he focuses almost exclusively on the Steele dossier and basically says there should have been a preliminary investigation. Of course, he didn't say anything about when the FBI went after Hillary Clinton with a full bore investigation based on the book Clinton Cash, which was, in effect, a bunch of newspaper clippings distorted. What we know is, despite all of the breathless tweets from the likes of Nancy Mace and I think most embarrassingly, the ranking member of the Senate Intelligence Committee, little Marco Rubio, who shrinks before us minute by minute. Despite that, there was collusion with Russia. The Mueller report made it clear if they did not use the word. They said if we could have exonerated Donald Trump, we would have, but did not. And a whole host of people were, including Paul Manafort, among many others, were convicted.
And
We
let me
know
just
that,
break that apart, right? Just to be clear, the exoneration went with the obstruction piece, but in part one, you're absolutely right. They never cleared even Don Jr. What the first part of the Mueller
Yes.
report said was, first of all, collusion doesn't apply here. The crime we'd be looking at is conspiracy, and they
yeah,
said there wasn't enough evidence of an agreement, but there was evidence of many things, meetings where the Russians independently said we want to help Donald Trump win. There's obviously evidence and indictments for, the troll farm out in Russia. But yes, you're right on this that this was the investigation did lead to evidence of obstruction, and then also you remember Norm the part
10
about
examples, to
yeah
be
go
honest.
ahead yeah
Yeah. There were 10 examples in the Mueller report
of
that
the
they cited
obstruction
that
right
of possible obstruction that they said warranted further investigation that never occurred,
And
actually.
some of them they went through just like a law exam where they said, here are the elements of obstruction. One is, the level, the corrupt intent to, in connection with some official proceeding, to, obstruct that proceeding. And so again, it's the obstruction, the nexus, and the intent. And they went through each of those 10 that you're talking about, Brian. And some of them, it was boom, boom, boom. Like
Yeah.
they marshaled the evidence. And of course, Mueller just sort of didn't want to say one way or another. He left it either for a blueprint for impeachment or for the next, Bill Barr was going to ignore it for the next attorney general who ultimately. But I want to go back to this Durham thing. So Durham, you mentioned, Norm, that there were a couple cases that didn't pan out. Wasn't them one against the lawyer? There was a lawyer at, I think, Perkins Coie, and that he was acquitted. Is that what happened? Is that what you're referring to?
Yeah, that's and then there was another case that he brought that did not pan out. But this was so we know that first of all, Trump openly colluded. Hey, Russia, if you're listening, find those emails. And
That's not even a
miraculously,
secret.
yeah, emails emerged right after. It's as if, and this is part of Trump's modus operandi, Donald Trump's modus
Yeah.
operandi, that if you say it openly, that's not the same as if you do it surreptitiously. And it is, of course, it's even worse. And we know that Paul Manafort was up to his eyeballs in collusion with Russian agents for Putin. Now, at the same time, what Durham does in this report is to say you tilted towards going after Trump, but ignored the foreign influence on Hillary Clinton. There is zero evidence that Hillary Clinton did anything or had any intention to talk to foreign agents or others about the election. Were there foreigners perhaps intervening? Maybe so, but that had nothing to do with Hillary Clinton. So this report is an embarrassment. And that John Durham at one point was considered to be a top flight Justice Department employee and prosecutor, that he even has a license to practice law after this, is really bad stuff.
Yeah,
And
Norm, is that any different though than what Bill Barr did with the Mueller report? I mean, to me, I'm reading
yeah,
these reports and it sounds it's almost exactly the same. Bill Barr took a Mueller report which condemned Donald Trump, right? And as we already pointed out, 10 different times when there could have been and ticked off how it was, uh, 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 criminally liable for
yeah,
obstruction of justice. Now you've got this guy who comes out and goes, "Look, I'm protecting Donald." In essence, it's the same damn thing. Run up to an election, protect Donald, give him cover so he can then scream, rant, and rave about Hillary Clinton and stuff that are 8 years, 9, 10 years old. It's to me, it's the same playbook, different player, same playbook.
I'm
Hey,
hoping, Jen, that we know that Jim Jordan has asked Durham to come in and testify.
mm-hmm.
I'm just hoping that the great Jamie Raskin and the other smart Democrats on the Judiciary Committee bring their, intelligence and depth to bear. And remember, this guy Durham went all over Italy, spending taxpayer money on lavish meals and other things, basically to try and find more dirt, which he did not find. This is a bad guy, and there's a lot that Democrats can do in questioning this guy to point out his sophistry.
It's, to me, it's so interesting, the contrast between where truth and justice happen, which is ultimately, as hard as it is to happen, inside of a court of law, versus this kind of report or the town halls, or in other words, when there's real stuff happening, like an indictment of Donald Trump or a jury verdict against him, or a several special counsel investigations, or another impending indictment. This is super real and has major consequences. And yet, the sort of sideshow kind of can take center stage because of this. I don't know if this is a media problem, But the Durham report, like you say, it's kind of a nothing burger. And Donald Trump doing the town hall and re-defaming E. Jean Carroll, despite what a jury found, we have like still this kind of split reality
Yeah.
that I find to be one of the most dangerous things that we face right now as a society. Because an
I,
ordinary person, whether it's a young person or an ordinary person who's busy trying to run their life, their family, their jobs, if they just flick on the news or flip on their social media, they're getting all these false equivalencies. And or people like, whether it's Jake Tapper trying to say this is a big deal, or Anderson Cooper trying to gaslight us about how they stacked the audience to cheer for this unrepentant rapist at the town hall. What's going on?
well, it's a couple of things to unpack there. First of all, with the town hall, I know three people that were in that town hall, and they said, look, it wasn't, they were told they couldn't boo, they could only cheer. And when Donald Trump said some of the most egregious things that he said, more than half of the audience simply sat there and did nothing or frowned. It was the vocal minority. That is Donald Trump's audience, the vocal minority. And he's trying to make it sound like he has much more support than he actually does. So yes, there is a problem. The second thing to unpack with that is you have to be a wise and an investigative reporter yourself when you watch news these days. You cannot take things for granted without double checking, triple checking, and checking who's vetted the facts and who you're looking at. So if it's Breitbart or the Epic Times or Bufu Bamubu or whoever it is, you gotta know whether or not they're
Wait, can you wait, bufuamumu.com or
yeah,
what?
bufuamumu.com. Yes, but if you actually check it out and vet it, it's like I know people are very upset that Donald Trump did that town hall. But here's the thing: it exposes. I think I take the opposite view on that. It exposes him even more for how depraved he is, and I think it helps other people understand when he comes out. Right now the Republican Party is saying that President Biden doesn't want to solve the debt ceiling problem. It was, and that they do. However, the guy who's the head of their party sat live on television and said, "Screw it, default on the debts," and which he's done his entire life. So,
Actually, can I give the quote? I think we should do a default.
yeah, I think we should do a default. And
I mean,
we're not
not only
playing
is
Monopoly,
he
Donald. You didn't
an
roll trip sixes.
he's
Come
such
on, give
an
me a break.
idiot and inarticulate and vulgar. On top of
Yes.
everything bad about him.
Oh, and you're a nasty, you're a nasty person. Come on. All of that is just an indication to me of how desperate he is. And I had, not seen him in a while in person. I thought he came across as pedantic and tiresome. I thought he looked a little tired and angry. And all of that stuff is, you need as a viewer, and I hope that we're teaching people how to be judicious viewers and readers of news, because it's not. You've got to be able to discern. If you're going to just accept what you see, you're going to get screwed. And I think, and at the end of the day, though, I also think that the more you see of Donald Trump, the less you like of him. And there's a fatigue factor even for those who like him. They're going, all right, fine, we've seen it, we've heard it.
I know,
Let's get bills to
yeah,
pay.
but I'm really worried because maybe it's because I just lost.
Yeah.
I mean, spoiler alert: Sunday's episode of Succession. Are you Succession watchers? You too? Yeah. So
Unfortunately, it reminds me too much of life, but
yeah,
yes.
I mean, there's, I don't, without going over the details, it was a little bit of a wake up call because there's always this forgetting that this man is likely to be the Republican candidate, and
At this point,
at
at
this
this
point,
point in time.
and
But I don't think I think you have to carry this is just May of the year before the election. And so much can happen between now and next May, which
right.
is when you really have to start paying attention. And I think that Donald Trump is trying to make people believe he's trying to steamroll his way into this. And I think he's already laid the foundations for backing out of it. He said, I can run. And then a doctor will say, hey, you can't do it. And I got to back out. And
He
so
can't. He's got these criminal charges. He's got
I
all.
understand that. I do
On this
understand
one,
that.
Brian, I take the opposite point of view. He wants to run because he still thinks he can win. And the fact is that while it would be nice to have discerning viewers, we have many more who are not.
Oh, I
That
agree with that.
that given the electoral college and the voter suppression measures that are taking place in state after state, given the possibility that the pernicious no labels could try and swing the election to him, he's got a chance of winning. And
Of
if he
course.
wins, he will pardon himself. And he will pardon all of the others involved in January 6th and beyond. He will put in Michael Flynn and others, and he will exact retribution, as he said. He wants to
Well, this
run
is a revenge tour.
One
for an
second, Bry.
excuse to back out.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that. What I think is that we're missing a finer point. And I'm more concerned if he isn't there, who will be? And
Yeah,
that's Ron DeSantis. And
Ron
everything that
Well, he's
everything that
awful.
you've
That's the point I'm making.
yeah,
It's
everything that you've just said about Donald Trump, double it with Ron DeSantis.
we have a problem because what Ron DeSantis demonstrates is how much we often ignore the problem we have, in local school boards and in states where a single, parent, a single person in the community can decide for everybody else what's going to be in the public library or what's going to be part of the curriculum.
yeah,
And the thing about the whole argument about states' rights, whether it comes to questions of abortion rights or it comes to curriculum in the schools or what have you, or they don't. It's not the argument that, oh, we just want to leave it to the states is absolutely not true, because if you look at the way the College Board works, if Florida, giant state, refuses to teach a certain curriculum, then they're going to have one test, and then they're going to change the curriculum to satisfy Florida. It's kind of like the reverse of what happened, or similar to what happened in California. When California changes the emission standards, the auto companies have to comply. Well, now this kind of thing is happening. And, furthermore, there's, Donald Trump he said at the town hall, just going back to it, he would not preclude, he had hinted that he would absolutely sign a nationwide abortion ban. The only thing he's quibbling about is how early, would it be, not even, would it be a ban from conception? Or would it be 1 week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 6 weeks? He will do that. And this is
his only
happening.
concern
And
is
same with DeSantis, by the way. I should say I should, from now on, instead of saying Donald Trump, I should say the Republican leadership will.
yeah.
Yes, and what my concern actually, Jen, is that Donald Trump is trying to learn now how to control government norm in case he gets back in, and he wants to do everything that you outlined. The real concern is that DeSantis already knows how to do that. He knows how to pull the levers of government much better than Donald Trump ever has. And as far as the nationwide ban, if you know Donald Trump, the only thing that he's going to be concerned about is he wants to make sure that the ban isn't in place until after he's notified by his girlfriend that she's pregnant. So he could at least have, that will be the deciding factor.
Oh, they'll never be for people like him. There'll always be the option for a DNC or a surgical procedure or what have you.
Yeah,
like none of the rules are apply to these.
None of the rules apply to any of them that have versus those that have not. You are absolutely right.
I'm skeptical about DeSantis winning a nomination, but I agree with you entirely that he is an evil, evil figure. And what he's doing in Florida is even beyond what you said, Jen. He's trying to destroy all public education.
Right.
He wants to replace the public schools from elementary through high school with schools of indoctrination. He wants to basically turn the public universities in Florida into mills of right-wing conspiracy.
Right.
That's only a part of it. Now, if you look at the people that he's put in place, including a surgeon general who basically lied about COVID and who's a full-on quack, and most of the others, you look at what he's done to fire elected district attorneys. He is a full-blown fascist, in my view.
Yes.
And yes,
Yeah.
but he is also a pill and somebody who can't stand up to criticism. So I doubt that he'll make it. But the reality is, any of the others out there, there may be some who you could imagine would be marginally better if somehow a Chris Christie emerged. He's not going to blow up our alliances the same way that Trump or DeSantis would, but he'll put in judges who are just as bad as Alito, Thomas, and the other corrupt ones on the Supreme Court. He'll tilt policy in a terrible direction. Uh, None of them would do any good for the country except to take us further into the dark ages. But I still think if I were John Roberts at this point, I'd be looking into whether you can administer the oath of office in a federal penitentiary or a state one in Georgia. Uh,
Well, you got to admit
and
that'd
then
be a great scene in a movie.
yeah, then the Supreme Court is
Well,
going to have to decide whether you can pardon yourself from prison
Yeah.
as a president.
How would you like to hold cabinet meetings in prison? That's
no, I mean, the thing is, right. I mean, DeSantis is not charismatic. And that's what made me so concerned about the succession program, because the guy they have playing the character running for president, the fascist guy, is charismatic and attractive. And if the Republicans weren't also, or politicians in general weren't also stuck on themselves, they would find somebody who would fit the bill. And thank God
Yeah.
they haven't. A current, like a modern day
Cheney and
Ronald Reagan.
Kinzinger. Cheney,
Don't. So when you say Cheney and Kinzinger, I'm going to go back to when I thought you were talking about Dick Cheney
yeah,
and Henry
Liz
Kissinger.
Cheney,
Right.
Liz Cheney.
No, I mean Liz
If those
Cheney.
two,
Right.
that's the scary.
Right.
To your
Because
point,
her
Jen,
politics on choice are terrible. She's so anti-choice.
I don't like her at all. I don't think she's a heroist. But the Republicans, if they ever got their their collective shit together, that would be that's a ticket to could entice women voters and moderates and others because of the stance that she took in January 6th. They won't look any farther than that than go, she's a hero.
That's not going to happen. And
I
you
know
can
it won't happen. It will never happen because she couldn't get out of a Republican primary because of what she did to Donald Trump. But to Jen's point, that's the type of thing that I don't think DeSantis has all the appeal of roadkill. And if you're a Democrat right now, you want him instead of Donald Trump. And it doesn't matter what the polls say right now about Trump, because in the end, if the Democrats get their, they can snatch defeat out of the jaws of victory every time. But if they got their messaging down, they'll thump Trump. But and they could take DeSantis, but Kinzinger and Cheney would be
it's
the
all
fearful.
it's all the electoral college. I mean, let's just remember, I know you all know this, but
Yes.
let's just be clear. Hillary Clinton won the popular vote and just, barely lost the electoral college. Let's remember, Donald Trump has never won the popular vote.
No.
Okay, so it's very much a question of how these states go and how their gerrymandering goes. And like, on Succession, spoiler, if someone bombs, the Milwaukee vote office, I mean, that just freaked me out. We don't have anything in place. What if there's a major storm, an early snowstorm? There's so many factors that that I'm very nervous, even if you think Trump can be thumped. I don't know.
I will tell you what makes me even more nervous. The way the press is covering the debt ceiling,
Okay, good.
including all of these, taking statements by Kevin McCarthy at face value when he says, "I just don't think that Joe Biden wants a deal." If there is a default, or if we come close again, and this time I think the reaction in the markets will be even worse than it was when we came close in 2011, it will very likely get blamed on Joe Biden. And that could carry through into next year. Now, you put that together with the Electoral College bias, with what we're seeing in Georgia and other states now, North Carolina, the swing states in one form or another that are tilting the scales even more against Democrats. if you think about what may well be the lack of enthusiasm that should be there for good parts of the Democratic Party base, and then you throw in the no labels threat, uh, we are far from being confident that we're going to get another Democrat in the White House. And, there are just a whole lot of things that are making me uneasy out there. They shouldn't be. We don't have a Republican Party anymore. We have a full blown fanatic cult. And whether it's Trump or almost anybody else who conceivably could win a nomination, we're heading down a bad path and they could easily win. And if they don't, there's still a very great likelihood that Republicans take the Senate and would make the life of a second Biden term miserable. That would be the end of more judges. That would be the end of effective, if there is any oversight of the Supreme Court. They would be unleashed in ways, and that's true of other courts as well, in ways that would really hamstring a president
So,
and the
what
country
should we
down.
do? What should all of us, what should you, me, and Brian do about this? And what should the people who are watching and listening? Because there's plenty of time to try to do something, but what is that thing?
Well, among other things, we really do need to keep shining a spotlight on no labels and make sure
So
that they
let's,
don't.
I know what that is, but what, do you want to elaborate a little more about that?
Yeah. This is an organization started a long time ago by Nancy Jacobson, who's an activist in her own part, but married to Mark Penn. It was originally a very good idea to try and lower the temperature and focus on problem solving. It has degenerated into something else. One of their co chairs is Joe Lieberman. They have $70 million in mostly dark money funding, and they're aiming at getting on the ballot for an independent candidacy in states across the country. And they have succeeded in Colorado and a few other places. They have now been charged with deception in Maine by trying to get people to sign a petition that they think is just to allow an independent candidate on the ballot, but it's actually switching their party allegiance to a no labels party. And while they say that they won't put up a candidate if the two parties put up non extremists, they have basically equated Joe Biden as an extremist with Donald Trump as an extremist. So it's something to keep an eye on. At the same time, you, Brian, and I have to do what we've been doing, which is to scream as loud as we can, using the bully pulpits, weak as they may be, to try and put the spotlight on mainstream media, among others. The publisher of the New York Times did an interesting, and if you looked at it in isolation, quite reasonable piece in the Columbia Journalism Review defending objective journalism. But if you juxtapose that with some of the ways in which the Times has covered these issues, and the Times is still the paper of record, and it's used by newspapers and other media around the country to frame issues. If you look at what's happening with CNN, and that's still a place where it's framed for an awful lot of potential voters, we have to keep pounding away at the reality that your job is not to report both sides as if they're equal,
Well,
to normalize abnormal politics, but to report the truth.
let me just say a quick thing, Brian,
Yeah,
which is
sure.
what the Times doesn't have, I don't think, and I don't think the Post does either. They've got their reporters who can talk about the horse race or what this one said or what that one said, and they have opinion columnists, but none of their opinion columnists are actually policy experts in any of the major policy areas. They don't have
Well,
they
they're
don't
not
have
even
a
journalists, Jen.
they don't have a deep bench of experts. And I remember this from
Yeah.
years ago, two election campaigns ago. They don't even bring on people, I think, who are real experts. I don't mean just that have been reporting on it,
That's
but you could
because of
have
the
academics who specialize in any of these areas who actually are credible, who could
Yeah.
be opinion columnists and talk about the campaign platforms and actually say whether something's bullshit or not. I mean, something like, not, I don't know. They don't do that. And that's a
Well,
problem.
that part of it is budget, but let me unpack two things. First of all politics is local. Tip O'Neill taught us that, former Speaker of the House. In those areas in the country where the electoral college is up, that's where going forward, we've got to concentrate on those states, those swing states, in order to make sure that the Republicans or or I don't want to call them Republicans, let's call them what they are, where the fascists, the minority fascists don't win. That's where they're going to concentrate their efforts. That's where we have to concentrate ours. You cannot depend on the Democrats, who are horrible at messaging, to do it. They are horrible. And the mainstream media, worse. And here's the problem in the mainstream media. I take umbrage with that Columbia Journalism Review piece from the New York Times, for one reason and one reason only. There's no such thing as objectivity. And I get tired of hearing people in my business saying we have to be objective. That's just cover for bullshit. The bottom line is you have to present vetted facts. That's the coin of the realm. And if the Times would concentrate, and if CNN would concentrate on vetted factual information, we'd all be a lot better off, rather than telling me, both sideism, false equivalency. Well, I'm being
Well,
fair.
let me go
Horseshit.
back to the at
Horseshit.
the town hall, having Caitlin Collins just say no, that's not true, and fact check him, and then he's this sort of like
And
tsunami of
ignored it.
lies. What they should have done, and I heard that they negotiated, they couldn't, is they should have done pop-up video like they used to do on VH1. As soon as he said a lie, you could have the actual something bigger than him, because he's so big and so commanding. Anything he said to the audience that they'd pre-selected to applaud, and you said, Brian, and
Yeah.
weren't allowed to boo, made it made him able to amplify the lies. I want to do something in our final 10 minutes here, which is something that Waj did last week. Folks who are watching, can you, in the comments, make a list of questions you have? I'm looking now, and I'd like to respond to those. So I'm gonna before while you're doing that, I'm gonna ask Norm, so for a optimistic take. Like, what is the thing? I know this is out of your comfort zone, but is there anything happening or has happened this week in the news or is coming up that gives you renewed hope about the future of our country?
Sure. Before I get to that, Jen, I just want to say that if we're going to do a town hall, I want it to be like Mystery Theater 3000. If any of you remember that,
Yeah.
you know,
We can sit on the side and go bullshit.
no, you have three experts on a couch, and
Yeah.
when he says something, they say, "That's a bunch of bullshit. Here's the reality." But we shouldn't be doing town halls. So a couple of things that are positive. One is, astonishingly, at the border, we see a dramatic drop off in crossings. And that actually is a good thing because it takes the pressure off where we don't have the ability or the facilities to take in large numbers of people who are legitimate asylum seekers, find a place to put them, and then be able to adjudicate them. And despite, Republicans are searching for a big issue to mobilize their base in the aftermath of Dobbs. They were hoping the border would be the one. And of course, the nonsense that we see from Elise Stefanik and others who look at when we capture all the fentanyl or get bad actors coming across the border as bad news, when in fact it's a sign that we're actually making things work at the border. But that's good news. I think the second piece of good news is that so much in the economy is actually working quite well, even if people don't recognize it. Gasoline prices are coming down. And then one third piece of potential good news, which is that I think the counteroffensive that the Ukrainians are going to do is going to devastate the Russians even more. And that could be good news globally as well. So there are some good things. And finally, I'm seeing at least a few signs that congressional Democrats, more in the House, we're in the minority than in the Senate, and the three of us and others have to put pressure on senators, are starting to push back a little bit. They're starting to look at what Republicans are trying to do with their budget cuts, with the devastation that we're seeing with women almost bleeding to death because they're being denied treatment, even if it's not an abortion. They're starting to try and frame this in the right way. If they do more of that, we'll be in better shape.
Thank you. How about you, Brian?
I
I saw you were
well,
taking out your guitar. Were you gonna like play? Were you playing
man, I was gonna
Kumbaya?
say he's hitting it. All I got to do is hit the right chord, and he's there. But no, I think it will. What I see good. Look, I've in the last year and a half, I've actually driven across the country 3 times. We won't say why, but family stuff. But I have seen, for example, the infrastructure bill well at work everywhere. If the Democrats would take, I would love to see them take
Yeah.
more, responsibility for that good side of it. I do also see people trying to work together more. That gives me hope. Nothing brought me more hope than seeing a family member of mine who's so MAGA, it's disgusting, and then someone in my family who's so far left that I find it disgusting. But together, and they're married, but together they were actually starting to work together. I think that this country has reached the tipping point in the divisiveness. And what I do see on a daily basis is people who just want to work together. If
Uh
they
huh.
can be provided with ways to do it instead of ways to drive them apart, I think we're headed in the right direction. And Norm, God bless you, because the first stuff that you were talking about made me so damn depressed. I was glad to
Yeah.
see you had. I was glad to see you had some positive. I'm always the one thing I do like about Biden is whenever, and he's answered, I'll give him this. Every time I've been in front of him, he's answered a question from me. And the thing that he's always said is he is not a hopeless romantic, but a hopeless optimist. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. So for me, seeing people even though I disagree with him on things, but to see them caring about the things that matter and being hopeful themselves gives me hope.
You
So
know, I want to add to this. Like, I'm a hopeless optimist, but I'm also I believe in facts and science. So let me give you a metaphor. Um, over the past number of years, what's been kind of a miracle is treatment for breast cancer has gotten so much better. I have so many friends who it's been detected early on. It's hard treatment, but they're having clean bills of health year after year. And I think about all these women friends of mine who wouldn't be with us, who would have left their children and their families. And I am so grateful for that. But I didn't just say, let's just pray the cancer away.
right,
I am someone who is optimistic when I see, are there results, is there science, whatever. So the same thing is true. We have a cancer on our democracy, and that is now the current Republican Party.
you hit the
And
right chord
I
there.
don't, and I think you have to acknowledge it. You can't just say, well, it's going to get better, but we have to point out, the scan. If there's cancer on the scan, then we need to do the surgery or the chemo. It's not
Yep.
going to just go away on its own. So I think that for people, like, I think the reason why I don't easily get depressed about these things is because I can clearly see the evidence and I have hope because in history we have done this before, but nothing gets better by looking the other way. It only
Yep.
gets better by facing up
Facing it.
to it and treatment. And that's what I think.
Amen.
We've got some questions, and one is a really interesting one that I haven't heard before. Someone said, if all libraries have free meeting rooms to reserve and use for gatherings, are they ever used? And that's a good question. I think so, I think people should think about that. Like, it is a room to meet in your town and talk about what's going on in your town. If you're concerned about people getting on the school board who are going to ban books, maybe gather people together who believe in freedom of speech and believe in reproductive freedom and believe in shared prosperity. Get together, have regular meetings. Why not? Maybe some libraries these days let you bring snacks. I think that's a great idea. Another one that was more for the group, which is and I'll send this one to you, Brian, and then Norm. Why someone asked why isn't the alleged uh, pardon for money allegation? Why isn't that top news, Brian?
I'm sorry, the what?
The allegations in the Rudy
Giuliani.
Giuliani lawsuit. Why isn't the allegation that Trump was allegedly involved in selling pardons? Why is that not top news? Someone asked.
That is a very good question. And that is, but here's the thing: every time we touch Trump in the media, we screw it up. And so um, there is a tendency among, and I don't want to say mainstream media. I don't like that term because it was actually used, I believe, first in Germany. I think corporate media is the proper term. Those things are not often touched upon in corporate media for two reasons. We don't have, to Jen's point earlier, about opinions and policy. We don't have the bench strength in the press anymore to attack these things and to look at them because because of media consolidation, we have smaller and smaller staffs of younger and younger reporters who have no clue how to tear apart an issue and look into it, and it doesn't drive ratings. So you're not going to see that unless there's a charge or unless it jumps out at us in a more prolific manner. It's just an accusation buried in an investigation on Rudy Giuliani, and it's not the news of the day for them. So unfortunately, until we get better reporters, we're screwed.
I would add to that. This woman not only has said in her filing that Rudy was saying that pardons were 2 million that he would split with Trump, but also that early in 2019 he was hatching up a scheme to say that the election was stolen. Now, those are allegations. Brian is right. But we also know that Rudy let this woman have 30,000 of his emails transfer to her computer. And that includes emails with the Trump family, with all of the people around Donald Trump, probably with some Russians. And it's quite possible, if I would assume that Jack Smith and the people around him, Fannie Willis and others, and Tish James, are all looking into whether they can subpoena her computer and get access to those emails. Because these are not just emails from Rudy Giuliani, there are emails to Rudy Giuliani. If indeed there was a pardon scheme, it is quite likely that there are emails between Giuliani and maybe Donald Trump Jr. or maybe Trump himself saying, okay, here's somebody who's willing to give us the 2 million. Then they can trace the money.
I don't think he's ever on his own email.
Yeah.
And secondly,
agree.
based on an interview, the lawyer was on some show last night, and though he said there were recordings of other things I guess in the complaint, when it doesn't say I think he's been through every email. I don't know if they have evidence in the email, but you're right. There could be hints and there could be code language, Norm.
Yeah.
And there are also other people she must have told contemporaneously about this, right?
Remember what Michael Cohen said? It was, you ever saw the movie Goodfellas? Big Paulie, he didn't talk in front of more than 2 or 3 people during the day. He didn't want anybody hearing what he said, and he didn't want anybody hearing what was said to him. And Cohen said that Donald Trump often did not get involved in email, did not get involved in texts, only on, as you said earlier, Norm, he thought doing it out in public absolved him of any criminal liability.
The question is, would Rudy Giuliani, if he thinks Donald's going to win, no one's going to flip on Donald if they think he could win.
Yep.
Because look what happened to Michael Cohen, right? There's always, but, Rudy also isn't in his right mind. And maybe he will, because he may be in a lot of trouble. As Norm mentioned, there are all these emails, and there's been discovery in these various criminal and civil cases. And if it turns out he didn't hand over some of the emails he should have, you've got obstruction right there. There's he's in for going to go through some things, as they all say.
And well, he should. But even if Trump is not doing this directly, we're going to be able to find out if And you can, first of all, Rudy is not going to use code language. He uh, but I can imagine reaching out to Mark Meadows.
Uh-huh.
I can imagine reaching out to Mike Pompeo. I can imagine Don Jr. or Eric being involved with these schemes. And even if Donald wasn't directly, if we find that somebody paid money to Rudy and others, and that Donald Trump pardoned that person, you're getting very close to. Although I've got to figure out what the criminal statute is involving selling pardons, but
It's
there's got to be
18
one or two.
USC. It's 18
Yeah,
USC 201 probably. It's
yeah,
probably also the conspiracy statute. It's
yeah.
probably we could go on. It's probably also whatever. We could go on and on about that. But even if Donald Trump didn't know about it, if Rudy did solicit people to
Yeah.
do that, that in and of itself is a crime too.
And it would be people around Trump, including very likely his family.
So
Yeah, and
it's
he's already shown
but
a propensity to throw them under the bus.
and before we wrap it up, just the other reason I think that it's not as big of a story in the press is there's a concern about defamation. You don't really want to, based on just one person's complaint, they need to probably see if she'll talk to them, what other evidence. I imagine the reporters, I imagine that this lawyer's phone is ringing off the hook right now.
Well,
with
Jen, that
reporters.
goes back to the earlier thing about not having the experience to handle it. They don't want. You're right. They don't want a defamation suit, but we don't even have the bench strength in most major media to take that issue and to dig into it. We just don't have the people. And so,
Well,
yes,
also
you're
Jack
absolutely
Smith.
right.
And Jack Smith might be getting there first and telling them don't talk to anyone but us right now.
Yeah,
I mean, if I were him, I would be doing that.
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay, so one last thing. Mary, when she's here, often has that bumper sticker. So, Norm, what's your bumper sticker for today?
What's my bumper sticker for today? Go to Brian first. I think about that.
My bumper sticker for today: pick up my guitar and play, just like yesterday. And I get on my knees and pray I won't get fooled again.
I like that. That's a little long for a bumper
Yeah,
sticker. Mine is. Go ahead,
Yeah.
Norm.
No,
You
go
first.
ahead. You go ahead. Yeah.
I'm trying to think of something that's still hopeful. Maybe mine is if you can read this bumper sticker, you're too close to the back of my car. I'm kind of ornery today.
I think I will go with what I'm now saying every time, which is multiple times a day, we hear of another mass shooting and deaths, another day in paradise.
Right. It's the guns.
And Brian, you can use your guitar to that song. Another day in paradise.
I'll hit
Well,
the E.
Thanks,
By
friends.
the way,
Oh, yeah.
I happened to come across last night it's an MGM Plus documentary series on the music scene in California in the 1960s, 70s, and 80s. That is really worth watching.
I've seen it. It's good.
Yeah, a lot of Joni Mitchell, Neil Young, Crosby, Stills, Nash.
Is that the one with Jason? Is that the one with Jason Dillon in it? Oh no,
no, I don't think so.
Okay, good.
Jacob Dillon.
Jacob Dillon. Sorry.
Yeah, Bob's son.
It's called Laurel Canyon.
Yeah. It's fabulous. I think I've watched it. I highly recommend it.
Hey, I'll plug one. It's called 6 Feet Apart. You can see it on Amazon.com, and it's about the early days of the coronavirus, and very good. Gee, I wonder who did it. Oh, I did.
Brian, it's too soon.
For those who don't know, I went to high school with Neil Young.
Did you?
Oh, you did?
Yes, I did, in Winnipeg. I went to high school in Winnipeg. Neil Young, and
you look too young for that, Norm.
Yeah, I actually was a few years ahead, but Neil, who I've touched base with, who's still absolutely fabulous. But when we needed a dance band for a prom, we had a group called Chad Allen and the Expressions, and that was Randy Bachman and Bachman Turner over. We had 2 Rock and Roll Hall of Fame acts.
Wow. What a legendary high school. What was in the drinking fountains, Norm?
Yes.
Neil Young
Don't
We
has
also-
has one of the best rockers of all time.
Yeah.
There's colors on the street, red, white, and blue, shuffling on the P, people sleeping in their shoes. There's a warning sign on the road ahead. A
Yep.
lot of people saying we'd be better off dead. Don't feel
Well,
like
with that-
rocking in the free world.
Well, that is
Randy
awesome,
Bachman's
guys.
still alive and kicking too. Neil lives mostly in Los Angeles with his wonderful, talented, and incredibly smart wife, Daryl Hannah.
What?
Wow.
Yeah.
Neil's married to Daryl Hannah?
Neil is married to Daryl Hannah, who should still have a vibrant career, but actually was, I think, one of the victims of Harvey Weinstein
right.
because she did not do what he wanted, and he basically got her blacklisted.
And so this whole thing comes full circle because of course, the
Yeah.
Rudy Giuliani case is also a case about sexual harassment and assault. Okay,
Yeah.
on that happy note, thanks, guys. It's been real. Hopefully, Mary will be back next week. And thanks, everyone, for watching.
Yep. See ya.